On Tuesday, the secure briefing rooms deep within the Capitol, usually bustling with activity and urgent conversation, stood eerily empty. Their heavy doors were locked tight, and the familiar hum of lawmakers, aides and staffers was replaced by a heavy, unsettling silence. Instead of the anticipated classified briefing on the U.S. military strikes against Iran, a meeting that many had prepared for with urgency and concern, lawmakers found only unanswered questions and a void where information should have been. The sudden, unexplained cancellation of the briefing felt less like a scheduling mishap and more like a calculated message, a signal from the Trump administration that Congress was being sidelined, treated as an afterthought rather than a co-equal branch of government. For many lawmakers, especially Democrats who had been demanding answers, the empty room became a powerful symbol of a dangerous new era, one in which the balance of power between the executive and legislative branches was being openly challenged. The silence from the White House left members of Congress not only frustrated, but also deeply uneasy. In the hallways, they speculated about what was being withheld and why. Some worried that critical intelligence was being kept from them, while others fumed at the lack of respect for congressional oversight. The abrupt cancellation robbed Congress of its chance to scrutinize the intelligence behind the strikes, to question the legal justifications, and to press for clarity on the administration's long-term strategy in the region. It left lawmakers in the dark at a moment when transparency was most needed. What began as a policy dispute over military action quickly escalated into a fundamental constitutional crisis, raising urgent questions about who truly holds the authority to take the nation to the brink of war, and what role Congress should play in decisions of such gravity. As tensions mounted, the stage was set for a dramatic confrontation, one that would test not only the limits of presidential power, but also Congress's willingness to defend its constitutional responsibilities in the face of executive secrecy. The news of the cancellation arrived with no warning, a single terse notification lighting up screens across Washington. There was no explanation, no context, just a sudden halt to what was supposed to be a critical high-level meeting. The message was brief, almost clinical, and left everyone scrambling for answers. All anyone received was a vague promise to reschedule, with no indication of when or even if that would happen. The abruptness of the message only deepened the sense of unease. Top officials, Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, were suddenly unavailable. Their absence was conspicuous, especially given the gravity of the moment. For lawmakers, the postponement felt less like a scheduling issue and more like a deliberate move to keep Congress in the dark. Many saw it as a calculated effort to withhold information at a time when transparency was desperately needed. The lack of a clear reason for the cancellation sent shockwaves through the Capitol, fueling rampant speculation among both lawmakers and the press. Was the administration hiding something crucial? Was this a show of political defiance, or a sign of deeper turmoil within the government? The timing made the situation even more volatile. The U.S. had just launched a direct military assault on Iran, and tensions in the region were at a breaking point. Every hour without answers increased the risk of miscalculation. Lawmakers were not just seeking information, they were trying to fulfill their constitutional duty to oversee the use of military force and prevent a wider, potentially catastrophic conflict. The White House's refusal to appear before Congress was seen by many as an abdication of responsibility, a move that undermined the checks and balances at the heart of American democracy. Even with a vague promise to reschedule, the damage was done. For 2 more days, uncertainty reigned, and the risk of a dangerous misstep in the Middle East remained alarmingly high. What began as a simple request for information had now escalated into a confrontation over transparency, accountability, and the very balance of power in Washington. The catalyst for the showdown was Operation Midnight Hammer, a U.S.-Israeli attack on Iran's nuclear sites. B-2 bombers targeted the Fordow facility, believed to be impregnable, in a dramatic escalation. The Pentagon declared success, and President Trump justified the action as vital to U.S. interests and Israel's defense. But conflicting intelligence soon emerged. A Defense Intelligence Agency report suggested the damage was limited, setting Iran's program back only months. Later, CIA and DNI officials claimed the damage was much more severe, fueling skepticism in Congress. Lawmakers were alarmed by the conflicting reports and the administration's move to restrict classified information. The strikes, meant to project strength, instead sowed confusion and distrust, leaving the true consequences dangerously unclear. At the heart of the outrage is a constitutional dispute over war powers. The War Powers Act requires the president to notify Congress within 48 hours of military action and limits unauthorized deployments to 60 days. Many lawmakers argue Trump's actions violated both the spirit and letter of the law, insisting that offensive strikes require prior authorization. The administration, like many before it, claims broad presidential authority, framing the strikes as defensive and consultation as sufficient. This clash isn't academic, it's about whether the decision to go to war is made deliberately, with Congress's consent, or by unilateral executive action. The White House's postponement unleashed bipartisan condemnation, with Democrats leading the charge. Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer called the move outrageous and an evasion of responsibility. Lawmakers demanded access to raw intelligence and legal justifications, not just press releases and tweets. The cancellation was seen as a strategy to avoid tough questions and deny Congress its oversight role. Some Republicans, especially non-interventionists like Thomas Massie, joined Democrats in demanding a greater congressional role. The frustration was not just partisan, it reflected a genuine fear that checks and balances were being eroded. Lawmakers felt sidelined in a decision of monumental importance. The president's belated letter and the canceled briefing were seen as insufficient and insulting. The administration was warned bypassing Congress would not go unchallenged. The official justification for secrecy was national security. Operational details were too sensitive, and leaks were a concern. The administration claimed it was protecting state secrets, not hiding from oversight. But many in Washington saw political calculation at work. Delaying the briefing allowed the White House to control the narrative and suppress conflicting intelligence. Projecting a strong, decisive president, especially in an election year, was seen as a deliberate strategy. Sidelining Congress reinforced Trump's image as a commander-in-chief willing to act without partisan interference. In reality, genuine security concerns likely mixed with political motives. The lack of transparency and history of clashing with oversight lent credence to suspicions of political maneuvering. The result, a fog of uncertainty, leaving Congress and the public struggling to understand the true nature of the conflict. The secrecy surrounding the Iran strikes threatens congressional oversight, a cornerstone of American democracy. When the executive can unilaterally wage war, it sets a precedent for future presidents to bypass Congress. This lack of transparency increases the risk of miscalculation and escalation, as seen in the conflicting assessments of Iran's nuclear program. Without robust debate, the risk of acting on flawed information grows. The public is left in the dark about why the nation is on the brink of war and what sacrifices may be required. This democratic deficit breeds cynicism and distrust. Internationally, it signals that U.S. policy can be unpredictable and subject to a single leader's whims. Allies may hesitate to coordinate, and adversaries may exploit internal divisions. The stakes are not just domestic, they concern global stability and the risk of unnecessary conflict. Congress is pushing back, using a range of legislative tools to reassert its authority over war powers. In recent years, lawmakers have grown increasingly concerned about the executive branch's unchecked ability to launch military actions without meaningful oversight or debate. Now, they are determined to reclaim their constitutional role and ensure that decisions of war and peace are not made unilaterally. Senator Tim Kaine is leading a high-profile vote on a resolution that would require the president to halt offensive actions against Iran unless Congress explicitly authorizes them. This move is not just about one administration, it's about setting a precedent for future presidents, making clear that military force must be subject to democratic checks and balances. In the House, Representatives Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie have introduced a similar measure, demonstrating that concern over executive overreach crosses party lines. Their bipartisan effort signals a rare moment of unity as lawmakers from both sides of the aisle come together to defend Congress's institutional prerogatives. These resolutions are designed to force a public debate on the use of military force and to put every lawmaker on record. By doing so, Congress hopes to increase transparency and accountability, ensuring that the American people are aware of where their representatives stand on critical issues of war and peace. Committee chairs have gone a step further, threatening to issue subpoenas if rescheduled briefings from the administration fail to provide sufficient answers. This signals a new willingness to use every tool at their disposal to demand oversight and information. Lawmakers are also taking their case to the public, using press conferences and social media to highlight the dangers of secrecy and the importance of congressional oversight. By engaging directly with constituents and the media, they hope to build public support for their efforts. The immediate goal is to force the administration to provide a full and honest accounting of the Iran strikes and the broader strategy behind them. Lawmakers want to ensure that critical decisions are not made behind closed doors, but are subject to rigorous scrutiny. The long-term goal is even more ambitious: to restore Congress's constitutional role in decisions of war and peace, and to re-establish the balance of power envisioned by the nation's founders. The battle lines are drawn. Congress is signaling with growing determination that it will not abdicate its duties. The outcome of this struggle could shape the future of American democracy and the nation's approach to war for years to come. The canceled briefing is more than a fleeting controversy. It's a pivotal moment in the struggle over who decides when America goes to war. The crisis with Iran has made this debate urgent and real, with life and death consequences. The framers designed a system requiring consensus between the executive and legislative branches. When a president claims unilateral authority to launch strikes, it challenges this fundamental design. The question, should war policy be decided in the Oval Office or through public debate in Congress? Proponents of executive power argue for speed and flexibility. Critics warn of catastrophic error. The Iran strikes, based on contested intelligence, show how quickly unilateral action can escalate. The outcome of this battle will shape who decides when and why America goes to war for generations to come.